All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Orange Crush podcast. We're almost there, according to David Hood's little subtitle line in his little camera view, if you want to call it that. But, guys, we just got back from Charlotte a couple days ago from ACC kickoff. Has to be probably one of the tighter security venues that, and you've covered this event much longer than I have, David, but I think I got stopped within 2 minutes of being in there, and it's all due to a certain attendance part of that. But we're going to get into all of that, what we learned about Clemson. But David, man, what a fun little couple days. That's the way.
First of all, I covered my first ACC kickoff 3 years before you were born.
Oh, wow. How about that?
And I was telling Mark Packer and I were talking while I was there, and I was talking about how different it is. And I can remember 1 year we had it at Pinehurst, and we were allowed to go play Pinehurst 4 or 1 if we decided we wanted to go out and play. They had this big veranda there in the Pinehurst, kind of the main building there at Pinehurst. But all of the interviews were held in this basement there. And I sat at a table with a bespectacled young man that was a linebacker from Boston College that nobody wanted to talk to. And I went up to him and shook his hand, and he's like, "Hi, I'm Luke Kuechly." And it was just me and Luke sitting at a table for forever with my wife, quickly sending me a text message saying he's pretty. And I was like, yeah, he's a good looking dude, no doubt about it. But, Dabo came in, maybe had 4 or 5 people around his table. And then you look, somebody stole Bill Belichick's name sign this week.
Somebody did, really?
Yeah, that's what one of the North Carolina writers was telling me. They had Bill Belichick's name there on the table as he was getting ready to come in, and somebody had taken it. And it was in many ways day 3 all about Clemson, but also all about Bill Belichick or Taylor Swift or whatever you want to call him, because that's what it looked like.
It was quite the security force, and I think that in the years that I've covered this, it's been kind of lax, and I think it's just the nature of it being the ACC's Media Days, is that it's not as grand as having the Alabamas, the LSUs, the Georgias, the perennial national championship contenders that the ACC just doesn't really have besides Clemson. They're kind of the standard bearer for the conference, and so it juices up a little bit for Clemson's day, and they try to be smart with arranging that. And then you add the off-season craziness that Bill Belichick's included himself into with his personal life. We'll just put it at that. And you get this just hodgepodge of different people and just a bunch of different interactions. But I think one of the crazier things before we get into the football is, if anyone hasn't heard it yet, that Fran Brown's kid is pretty darn good at college football 26, and Faxon Childress is pretty darn good at making a few enemies over at Georgia Tech.
It was a great day. If you haven't heard the story, Fran Brown's 12-year-old boy, Braden, his son, was over there schooling all the players, and I called Faxon and said, "You got to get over here and play the truth." That's what I was calling Braden. I'm calling him the truth. Faxon, it took him a long time to get over there, maybe 20 seconds, maybe 25, and he dials it up. And of course, Fran Brown's son plays at Syracuse. Faxon decides that he's going to play as Georgia Tech. Immediately before the game even starts, benches Haynes King, puts in Aaron Philo as the starting quarterback, and begins to spend most of the next 4 quarters talking trash about Haynes King while talking about the benefits of using Aaron Philo. It was a great game. But there toward the end, Keelan Rutledge, Georgia Tech offensive lineman, walked up, called it disrespectful.
He was mad
that he wasn't using Haynes King. Kyle Eford, the great linebacker for Georgia Tech, walks up. He's laughing at what's going on. But, of course, then at that point, Haynes King walks up. He's smiling because he sees Georgia Tech's being played, and Faxon is over there sheathing the sword and talking all kinds of smack to a 12-year-old. And, of course, somebody decided to be a real butthead and say, and say this out loud, the funny part of this is Haynes King watching Aaron Philo lead, Georgia Tech to a victory here.
Who
because
was that butthead?
It was me. I was the butthead. And this just absolute look of horror and disgust and anger on Haynes King's face. Faxon said, "Haynes, my man, let me explain." Haynes wanted none of it, ran off, and it was just, we were all laughing. It was great.
I think it was one of those things where, because we were also, it was such a back and forth game, David, and to our audience that hasn't played the game yet. It's still kind of new, so there's a lot of, I think, attention surrounding it still.
Yeah.
And we were having a blast, clearly. So a lot of people started gravitating, and it's just the crowd grew a little bit larger. There were probably 8 or 9 people already watching within the just back and forth nature of the event. People are scrambling, either covering their local team or just trying to get information on other groups, which is what makes the event really great. And just in its general, the idea of it is being able to make these interactions with other writers, me ask questions. So you had like different groups of people coming to see this game of Fran Brown's kid and a Clemson radio host battling it out. And the radio host is like talking smack to a child. And so there's just all the right elements of it. And then Georgia Tech's squad pulls up, and you have Haynes King, who likely will be using this as some sort of Heisman Trophy campaign down the road. Like when we're in the January, December part of this, David, covering this football season, and Haynes King is in New York, you and I will both know what spurned that motivation.
Well, don't forget, Clemson goes down there week 3 for a fist fight at high noon on the flats, right? And that's not going to be easy. Georgia Tech, a lot of one score. There's an ant on my wall. A lot of one score, one possession losses last year. They look to kind of get past that. So Georgia Tech not going to be a pushover this year. And Clemson week 3 down there, high noon. Let's go. I'm ready.
Yeah, the ACC opener for Clemson. So you get to ask a couple of the players about just sort of its relevance. And they understand it too, because Georgia Tech opens up with what we assume is Coach Prime. There's some weird, I don't know if you've seen this. He's calling for a press conference with his medical team tomorrow. And so that could potentially be some college football news that's worth tuning into. So I don't know what's happening there. I don't know what health issues Coach Prime is dealing with, but we'll find out tomorrow. But at the very least, a good Colorado team, or a revamped one, I guess, without Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, is going to be playing Georgia Tech. And that's one of those statement games for Brent Key. And then they play Clemson 2 weeks later. And so they understand if they could go 3-0, they're in the driver's seat for a potential playoff spot. And that's not hyperbole, just because of the nature of the Clemson hype. And so if you're kind of the dragon slayers of the media, Coach Prime hype, and then the actual football hype on the field, that's a pretty darn good job there by Brent Key. And that was one of the more important teams we got to talk to. And the great thing, and you and I both noticed this, we had somebody ask, I think it was Haynes King, about losing to Georgia 3 straight times. And you can just see Brent Key in the side of his chair, like, just starts to lose his mind a little bit. He just starts getting a little bit irked, and you can tell just how much he freaking loves to do this. So the slightest bit of perceived disrespect, or the slightest bit of, man, what a bad memory to bring up, he just crosses his arms like a sad child that was told no on extra time on the Xbox or something, and just like pouts. And I love it.
Well, and Haynes King turned and was talking about Kyle Eford and said he's a dog. And Brent Key did not like that. Like, not a dog. You can call him whatever you want to. He's not a dog. And then Brent Key showed his feisty side when somebody talked about the fact that they played at Georgia last year in Athens, took the Bulldogs to the wire. This year's game, one of those that Georgia Tech is selling, it's going to be played at the Mercedes-Benz Dome. There's going to be more Bulldog fans than Georgia Tech fans in there, I have a feeling. And, he was asked about it. And he said it's above his pay grade, but you could tell he was steaming. And he's like, we'll do it 5 o'clock today, Piedmont Park. We'll play anytime, anywhere, which kind of put me in mind of former Clemson defensive coordinator Kevin Steele, who used to say something really similar, but just some really good days. But, we also got to spend the last day with some Clemson players and head coach Dabo Swinney. And my big takeaway from talking to TJ Parker, Peter Woods, Antonio Williams, Cade Klubnik, was this is a group that not real big on talking about things, not real big on trying to say how good they're going to be, just locked in on, we've got a chance to be special, and that's all we care about. Like, we're just trying to work to make this season the best one that we can make it.
And it feels like it's different from, I remember 2023, there were rumblings of hype with the Garrett Riley hire, and you can almost feel like the players were feeding off of that and the way they answered their questions. And this year, there was a question asked about the LSU comments, and you have TJ Parker. He laughs at they're very much aware of some of these comments by Ryan Kelly, who I love that he's trying to stir the pot and just adding more fuel to the fire. Because if you're a college football fan, you've got this game scheduled and circled for that 7, 8 o'clock primetime spot. They're going to be watching it. The world will be watching. And so the more added fuel is just better for the game in general. But yeah, like you had kind of said, it's very much a business-like approach. And you get asked about all these other different games, but it's like they're not focused on Death Valley. Who's the real Death Valley? They believe that play is going to be decided in those 4 quarters. And for a lot of Clemson fans, the hype will be either justified or it'll feel like a disaster. There's so many different fascinating angles about it. And I think with Clemson facing off and against another SEC school, it's like proof of concept. And we're going to get to see that at least on Thursday is the progression of that with fall camp beginning. But very business-like approach. I think they were coordinated on their suit choices too. So just a little bit of added flavor to that ACC kickoff experience.
Peter Woods, I got to spend some time just in conversation, the two of us. And, I like to tell story. I like to set the scene, tell a story. And I said, here coming up on August the 30th, twilight's going to be setting in Clemson. The lights will be on. 82,000 people, maybe a little bit more, are going to be in Death Valley. It's going to be hot. LSU is going to be lined up across from you. You're going to look, to your right, and you're going to see TJ Parker. You're going to look to your left. You're going to see Cuddy, DeMonte Capehart. You're going to look down the line. You're going to see, well, help, what's going to be going through your mind. And, Peter almost got a tear in his eye. Like his eyes watered. And he said, unless you've ever done it, I can't explain it to you. And he said, I will take just a second, but then it's football. And he said, I really don't notice the crowd unless I'm on the sidelines. But when it's the game, it's kind of the game. And I think that is an example of just being locked in, that he's going to take a second. I'm going to look around and I'm going to enjoy it, but then it's all going to be about beating LSU. And, that kind of locked in demeanor was with TJ Parker too, where I said to TJ, this defense, especially those last 3 games with Lenore Sellers running wild, with SMU in the big second half, with Texas running wild, I said it was really a failure at all 3 levels. Failure to set the edge. Second level, linebackers nowhere near where they're supposed to be. Secondary playing somewhere off near the pyramids in Cairo, Egypt. It just a failure, right? It's schematically a failure. It is technically a failure, meaning playing technique. So technique-wise, a failure. And TJ was, he did not like to hear that because, he told me, he was like, yeah, it's an embarrassment, basically. And he said, we're trying to fix it. And I said, is it one thing? Is it a lot of things? And he was like, trust me, it's more than one thing. And Tom Allin has spent the first 6-7 months on campus trying to rectify that. But I have a story coming up on Monday, talking about maybe Monday, relentless havoc, which is what they hope this defensive line will create. But again, not a lot of talking about themselves. They would talk about maybe their teammates, but just kind of locked in. They realized that this is a chance to do something special because, look, let's face it, I'm not wanting to look too far ahead, but Clemson's going to lose its quarterback, a lot of playmakers, probably an entire offensive line, and an entire starting defensive line, and a starting cornerback and a starting lineman. Look, next year, there could be some issues in places. So everybody's looking at this like this is a year to make a run and then reload next year.
Before we get back to this video, we'd like to thank the title sponsor for this podcast, Newton, Scott and Associates. This team is headlined by Jeff Scott, former Clemson assistant coach and 2-time national champion, as well as Eric Newton, a longtime local and trusted real estate partner. These two are teaming up to provide a first-class experience for all Clemson fans. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, or build in the upstate area of South Carolina, you can trust Newton, Scott and Associates. Choose the same team that Clemson coaches are selecting when they're looking to buy, sell, or build, all the way from Tigertown to Lake Kiowee. For more information, you can find them at newtonscottsc.com or by calling the number 864-722-9062. That's 864-722-9062. 9062. Now, let's get back to the video. Yeah, there's the writing on the wall, right? Where you have sort of the opportunity to do something this year with the returning talent. That's why a lot of people are buying the stock for Clemson, is that you have that returning production and an uncommon, to use their word and their moniker, uncommon, to have such a lion's share of starters coming back after a team that made the playoffs. And so you have some confidence, some experience there, and just sort of at what you had mentioned about the business-like approach, talking to TJ Parker about Allin and sort of how he's, and I just tried to jump off of the comment that you had made in the ballroom about, yeah, they're getting all this attention, but Allin just has to turn on that Texas tape to really humble them, or show them the SMU tape, or the South Carolina Lenore Sellers scrambling highlight package. I'm sure that was that was probably not a fun watch for them the day after when reviewing the film, is just seeing 16 kind of run around like a cartoon character almost. It was pretty wild to watch it with your own two eyes if you're present at that game. So I do think there's an area of Clemson's, I think, whiffs or gaffes, whatever you want to call them, from 2024 almost serve to benefit them in 2025, because this isn't a team that just went 15-0 and destroyed everybody and plowed through the conference. There were some bumps. They lost to Louisville. Isaac Brown was a monster on that Saturday night in Clemson. You have the South Carolina game where the defense is out of place in the final drive and the offense isn't consistent enough. So you have sort of these points of reference to go back to, is you be able to tell yourself, we aren't that great. We still have a lot of things to do. We recognize there's hype. But I think that was kind of the theme of this ACC kickoff from them, was they're entering as sort of the crown jewel of the conference. Everyone's going to be asking them about how do they handle national championship expectations. And I wonder if a part of them back of their mind, they're almost not thankful for that experiences of being, we went 10-4. So it's not like we internally believe that we're great. Of course, they're going to have confidence, but there's some gaffes to correct, as you had mentioned. And so that almost serves to benefit the urgency and the focus when we approach Thursday and fall camp. And I'm actually very curious, David, I'd love to segue this back to you, is I remember last year, practice one, I don't know who I was talking to. It might have been you. Or it might have been you or somebody else. And I just asked them, does this look a little lackadaisical to you? Like maybe they're just happy to be here. The intensity wasn't really what it should have been after a tumultuous 2023 season. So I just sort of started asking people, and they're like, yeah, I kind of see it too. And then we get a couple of up downs to the next day. The intensity was right back. It was almost like they were a day behind. And so I'm curious, going into day one of this fall camp, what's the tone like? And I'd love to get your thoughts.
Well, we're going to find out really fast. It's going to be hot. It's going to be over 100 degrees when they start it Thursday. It's going to be warm. We're going to get to be out there Friday and the following Wednesday, just to get a chance to take a look at it. And while there are spots that, look, K Klubnik's a starting quarterback. We know that. We know kind of some, who the starters are going to be at some other spots. But running back, wide open. Tight end, wide open. You think it's going to be Olsen Pat Henry, but it's probably wide open. There are some spots on that defense that are wide open. Punter, wide open. There better be some urgency out there. Dabo loves it hot, and it's just going to be smoking out there. He's probably not going to like it. I think it's supposed to be a little bit cooler when they move out to Derby Meadows for the away game type practices. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Here's a takeaway from what you were talking about last year, is that intensity that was lacking that you were talking about, and then the next day, the intensity was kind of coach led. That's not good. The best teams, as we have often heard, are player led. And it appears that there are now a bunch of guys. Peter Woods doesn't really want to do a lot of talking. I don't think TJ Parker does. Ben Boulware, the linebackers coach, went in depth with us a couple of weeks ago about getting Wade Woodass to step up and be that vocal leader. And, it appears that there are some guys that are ready to go in there and do a little bit more talking. That was a great thing about that 2018 team is, you go, well, who was the best player? Yeah, Trevor Lawrence, but he wasn't a talker. Was it, Travis Etienne, not a talker. But he had Gage Cervenka, who would talk, and he had a Sean Pollard who would talk along that offensive line. And then there was a Christian Wilkins and a Cleveland Farrell and an Austin Bryant, and they were talkers, and then you had some of those linebackers who would lead. I think you're going to see that this year. I think you're going to see some of those guys. We've seen Cade already beginning to kind of grow even more into that role. And I did have one funny conversation with Peter Woods, though. And, we had a funny, conversation with somebody talking about how much Tom Allin talks at practice. And apparently he just never shuts up because he's always teaching. And I guess it was his son that sometimes he's got to tell him to shut up, quit talking. But we know Dabo is the mic man at practice. Dabo's handed a mic, and it is a constant stream of consciousness coming out of him. So I asked Peter Woods, I said, who's going to talk the most, Tom Allin or Dabo Swinney? And Peter pondered it, put his hand up, and then he goes, you know what, I'm just going to have to go with head man because he's always talking. So it'll be kind of fun to listen to those two guys too.
Well, it's fascinating what you said about Klubnik is that he started to assume command of that leadership role. And I think last year, and probably with his time when he entered on campus, so year one, he's the understudy to DJ Uyunglele. So as a freshman quarterback, do you try to usurp that? Do you kind of just do your job and wait for kind of something like that on those lines? Year two, you're the guy, but you're still trying to find yourself and try to understand what is my path going to be? And so I think entering his junior year, still there were questions. And so it was more focusing about, I got to make sure I am the right guy for this team and proving a lot of noise wrong. And now this year, there is no conversation. We're not sitting here talking for 21 minutes about whether Cade's the guy for Clemson or if there's some answer out there in the portal. We know what Klubnik brings to the table. Now it's just about rallying the troops. And this is, I think, another advantage for Clemson is there's a lot of familiarity there with guys like TJ Parker, Antonio Williams, Peter Woods, like you've mentioned. These guys know each other. They've been with each other for years now. And it's not a hodgepodge of random portal players having to discover each other and learn about their habits, stories, yada, yada, So this Clemson team will come out on Thursday afternoon with a little bit more of an advantage than most because of that returning production. They can get in each other's faces and challenge each other. Talked to TJ Parker about this, and he said it's easier to tell DeMonte Capehart or tell a Peter Woods to get yourself right. Obviously, you have the transfer in Will Helt, who's also assumed a little bit of a leadership role. You get the right culture guys as well. Tristan Smith, Will Helt, guys that have brought an energy to this group. So a lot of fascinating objects and items to tackle on Thursday, no pun intended, with football truly starting. That's when the season starts, man. I'm really excited. We've been doing a lot of hypotheticals, a lot of what ifs, a lot of projections, and now we finally get to see a little bit of that come to fruition on July 31st.
Yep, and then next Wednesday, we'll get to see him in full pads.
And you mentioned the heat before we wrap up. Did you step outside yesterday? Oh my goodness. Felt like I was going to have my shoes melt onto the driveway and I wasn't going to be able to move.
Today was maybe a little bit worse to me. I think it's supposed to be worse, maybe even than over the first 4 days this week. But then a big cool down. Highs in the low 80s, upper 70s, something. We haven't seen the 80s since early June.
No, we have not, which means that's golf weather right there. That's going to be a fun little couple of scheduling events, but it'll be also good for us to go out there and cover this team in some moderately decent weather. But David, do we have any final comments or observations? I see you leaning for something. Is there something you're trying to grab related to?
I'm not gonna comment on whether it's a child or not, but it's gonna be fun. This is now the time we're done with silly season, and we're still going to talk about it. But we will have more player interviews, maybe another chance to talk to Garrett Riley or Tom Allin at some point early in camp. We'll get Dabo Swinney again Thursday, even though I'm not real sure what he can say that he hasn't already said at his media day outing for almost an hour, and then 45 minutes at the ACC kickoff the other day. Not real sure what he can add to it. Sounds like everybody's healthy. The big weigh-in will be Wednesday. First practice will be Thursday, and we'll be here for all of it.
Let's go. I'm really, man. If you guys are getting ready to get fired up, ready to run through a brick wall, I'm ready to do it. Let's fire it up. Let's do it. Guys, thank you as always for tuning into the Orange Crush podcast presented by Newton Scott and Associates and Chick-fil-A. It's almost tailgating season. Why not be the hero of your little group by bringing in some chicken biscuits? Maybe you want to bring in some chicken nuggets, add some flair with some Chick-fil-A sauce. That's right. David Hood does love himself some sweet tea. So, guys, thank you as always for tuning in to the Orange Crush podcast. You guys are the best. Subscribe. You know the drill. We're rocking and rolling. It's football season. We're going to have another podcast coming soon about reasons why Clemson will be definitively better in 2025. We've kind of previewed a little bit today, but you'll get that added and much more content. Thank you as always. God bless y'all.